The rain didn't fall. It mourned. Thick clouds hung low over the cemetery, gray and heavy, like the hearts gathered around the casket. Rows of navy blue uniforms lined the path, motionless statues in grief. The American flag lay folded on top of the coffin, precise, perfect, ceremonial. But nothing about this day felt perfect. Among the sea of mourners, one figure sat still, head bowed, ears pinned slightly back. It was Max. He didn't whimper, didn't bark, just stared. Officer Jake Turner's name echoed through the rain as the priest recited the final rites, but Max didn't move. He sat planted at the foot of the casket, his thick black and tan coat already soaked from the downpour. An officer approached to move him aside. Max growled low, not hostile, just protective. "Let him be," Captain Harris murmured quietly. There was something sacred in that stillness. Something only Max could feel. As the honor guard fired the 21-gun salute, Max flinched, not at the sound, he was trained for that. But something else caught him. His head turned slowly. His eyes locked onto someone standing near the trees. A man in uniform, face barely visible beneath his cap. A faint growl rumbled again from Max's throat, but this time it was deeper, quieter. Only Emily Reyes heard it. She looked at Max, then followed his gaze. "Sergeant Maddox." The ceremony moved forward, but Max never looked away again. Later, under the tent, officers came by to offer words to Jake's widow. Emily knelt next to Max, her gloved hand brushing through his damp fur. "You miss him, don't you?" Max didn't respond. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe, it seemed. He just kept his eyes on the coffin. Or maybe, on the man who walked away first after the salute. Maddox. Flashback. Jake knelt beside Max in the training field, early sun warming the grass. "You're not just a dog buddy. You're my eyes when I can't see. My voice when I can't speak." "We're partners." Max barked, then licked his face, tail wagging. Jake smiled, eyes glinting with pride. "Let's go find some bad guys." End flashback. Now Jake was gone, and Max was silent. After the ceremony, the handlers tried to guide Max into the canine transport van. He resisted. Braced all four paws. Refused. Emily stepped in. "Let me try," she said. She held out Jake's old glove, the one he used to wear during training. Max sniffed it, looked into her eyes for the first time that day, then walked willingly into her car. That evening at the canine center, Max refused food, refused his new bed, refused the comfort of other handlers. He sat facing the door of the center's storage room, the one where Jake's personal locker was kept. Emily watched him from the observation window. "Weird, right?" said Officer Dillon beside her. "He's usually calm. This is different." Emily nodded. "He's not just mourning. Waiting." Max didn't sleep. Not that night, not the next night, or the one after. Emily tried to coax him, tried to comfort him. But he wouldn't rest. He would only sit still, unmoving, facing Jake's locker. At the canine center, his gaze never faltered, his body stiff. Every now and then he would let out a low whine, barely audible but sharp enough to make Emily's heart tighten. Something wasn't right. She had heard the stories about canines grieving for their handlers. Seen it with other dogs, heard the tales from veteran officers. But Max's behavior was different. This wasn't mourning. This was something else. He wasn't just missing Jake, he was waiting. The next morning, Emily walked into the canine center with a fresh batch of treats, hoping to distract Max to break his focus. As soon as she entered, he looked up at her with those dark, expressive eyes, his head tilted ever so slightly. "You okay, Max?" she asked softly. Max didn't bark, didn't wag his tail. He just stood and walked slowly to the locker door, his gaze locked onto it, unwavering. Emily stood beside him. She placed a hand on the cool metal of Jake's locker. The scent of Jake's cologne still lingered in the air, faint but present. "You think something's in there, buddy?" she asked. Max didn't respond, but she could see it in his eyes. The urgency, the knowing. It had been a week since the funeral. Everyone had moved on. Everyone except Max. He wasn't ready to let Jake go. And neither was she. She kneeled down beside the locker, opening the door slowly. Inside was Jake's uniform, a few personal items, and his old training gear. But at the very back of the locker, tucked behind a set of training dummies, was something else. A folded sheet of paper. Emily carefully pulled it out. It was a note handwritten in Jake's unmistakable scroll. The note was short, but its message was enough to make her stomach drop. "I know what's happening. Don't trust Maddox." She read it twice, her breath catching in her throat. What was Jake trying to tell her? Maddox. The name lingered in her mind. Sergeant Maddox. The man Max had growled at during the funeral. Emily's mind raced. She thought back to everything she had observed in the days following Jake's death. Max's strange behavior. His protective instincts. The way he had reacted to Maddox both at the funeral and again at the K9 center. She had a sinking feeling. What if Jake had known something? What if he had been onto Maddox? But why hadn't anyone else noticed? Why hadn't anyone seen it? Max's growl broke her train of thought. The dog was on his feet now, pacing in front of her, his body stiff with tension. He stopped, eyes fixed on something in the corner of the room. Emily followed his gaze. In the corner of the room near the locker's base there was something out of place, a slight indentation in the floor, as if something had been moved recently. Max moved toward it, sniffing the ground intently. He pawed at the floor, digging at the area just beside the locker. "What's this, Max?" Emily asked. Max growled again, low and deep. Emily knelt down, brushing away the dirt and dust. What she's uncovered made her blood run cold. A small brass key, a key to Jake's personal locker. Max stood back, his tail stiff, his eyes never leaving the key. Emily reached for the key, her fingers trembling. She knew that this was no coincidence. She had just uncovered a secret one that Jake had left for her to find. But the question was, what did the key unlock? The key felt heavy in Emily's hand. It was small, unassuming, but it was undeniable. There was something in that locker Jake had wanted her to find. Something important. But what? And why had he hidden it away where only Max could uncover it? She stared at the key for a moment longer, then slipped it into her pocket. Max was still pacing in front of the locker, growling low and soft. "Easy, Max," Emily whispered. "Let's take it slow, we'll figure this out." Max stopped pacing and sat down, his head cocked to the side, eyes trained on her. There was an odd stillness to his gaze now, almost as if he were waiting for her to take the next step. Emily stood up and moved to the desk, her fingers brushing over the papers on Jake's old workstation. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than just a simple locker key. Jake had been too smart, too cautious to leave something so obvious for someone to find. The morning air was cool against her skin as she stepped out into the parking lot of the K9 center. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon. It was still early, most of the officers hadn't arrived yet. Emily slipped into her car and started the engine. Max jumped into the passenger seat, his eyes focused on the road ahead. "Let's see what we can find, buddy," she said. The drive to the station was quiet. Max was tense, eyes darting left and right, his body rigid. He had always been observant, but today he seemed more alert than usual. At the station, Emily made her way to Jake's old desk. There she found more notes, scribbled, incomplete thoughts. Jake had always been a perfectionist, and the loose ends were unlike him. She started pulling the papers out one by one. Most of them seemed to be about routine casework reports and investigation notes, but there was one paper that caught her eye. It was a photograph of a man, face obscured by shadows, standing in front of a van. The picture was grainy, but Emily could tell it had been taken from a distance. Max nudged her arm, his nose close to the photo. Emily stared at it for a long moment, her mind working to piece together the fragments of a story she didn't yet understand. "Who is he, Max?" she asked softly. Max growled low in his throat, his hackles rising. It was the same sound he'd made when he'd seen Sergeant Maddox at the funeral. Emily ran her fingers over the photo again. There was something familiar about the man's stance, the way he held himself, almost like he was posing for the camera. And then she saw it, the van. The logo on the side was blurry, but Emily could make out a few letters. It looked like a security company. Emily's heart skipped a beat. There was no reason Jake should have had a photograph like this. No reason at all. She turned to Max, who was still eyeing the photo. His focus never wavered. "We need to find this man, Max. We need to know who he is." Max barked once, as if in agreement. The rest of the day was a blur. Emily spent hours digging through old case files and records, trying to find any link between the photograph, the security company, and Maddox. But there was nothing. No mention of a security company. No connection to Maddox. Frustrated, she returned to the K9 center, Max never leaving her side. The quiet buzz of the station felt distant as Emily sat in Jake's old office, staring at the photograph, the key, and the rest of the scattered notes. Max circled the Busraver room, sniffing at every corner. He seemed restless, his movements sharp and deliberate. Suddenly he stopped in front of Jake's desk, staring intently at the floor. "What is it, Max?" Emily asked, kneeling down beside him. Max sniffed the floor again, his body tense. Then with a quick motion he pawed at the ground, uncovering a small hidden compartment beneath the desk. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled as she opened the compartment. Inside was a small box, another note, and a flash drive. This wasn't just a trail of secrets. This was something Jake had set in motion. Emily picked up the note and read it aloud. "Follow the van. Trust no one. Maddox is involved. Has not who he says he is." The weight of the message sank in. Jake had known. He had known what was coming. He had been trying to protect her, trying to warn her. But it wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Emily's hand shook as she stared at the note, the words echoing in her mind. Maddox was involved. He wasn't who he said he was. Her mind raced with the possibilities. She knew Jake had been suspicious of him, but how deep did this go? What had Jake uncovered, and why had he kept it so hidden? She turned to Max, his eyes locked on her as if waiting for her next move. The dog's posture was firm, his muscles taut. He was ready. And somehow Emily felt it too, like they were both on the edge of something they couldn't yet understand. There was no time to waste. Emily had to act, but she had to be careful. Maddox was dangerous. If Jake had uncovered something big, then Maddox might be just the tip of the iceberg. Emily tucked the note and the flash drive into her jacket pocket and grabbed her keys. Max jumped into the car, immediately taking his place in the passenger seat, his eyes scanning the surroundings. He was alert, ready for whatever lay ahead. The drive to the security company's office wasn't long. Emily had done her research. The company was a front, one of many that had been set up over the years. On the surface it appeared legitimate, but Emily knew better. Jake had been right. There was something off about it, something that didn't add up. The building was nondescript, an office park on the edge of town wedged between a dry cleaner and a convenience store. Emily parked the car and turned to Max. "You ready, buddy?" she asked. Max gave a low bark of agreement. Emily stepped out of the car, her hand instinctively reaching for the holster on her side. She hadn't carried a gun in years, but she felt exposed without it. As she moved toward the building, she could feel Max's eyes on her. He was staying close, always alert. Inside, the air was stale. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Emily made her way to the receptionist's desk, where a young woman sat, her eyes darting nervously between the computer screen and Emily. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked. "I'm here to speak to someone about your security services," Emily said, her voice steady. The receptionist nodded, her fingers tapping on the keyboard. She made a call, speaking in low tones that Emily could barely hear. Moments later, a man emerged from a back room. He was tall, wearing a dark suit, his eyes hidden behind sunglasses. The same sunglasses that Emily had seen on the man in Jake's photograph. The same man. He smiled, but there was something cold in his expression, something that didn't sit right. "You must be Emily," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Greg, the owner of the company." Emily shook his hand, keeping her expression neutral. But inside she was reeling. She had found him. The man from the photo. The one who had been tied to Jake's death. Greg led her into a small conference room. As he closed the door behind them, Emily couldn't help but notice the flicker of something in his eyes. It was a momentary flash, but it was enough to make her guard go up. "I understand you're interested in our services," he said, taking a seat across from her. "I'm actually here to ask some questions," Emily replied. Greg raised an eyebrow, his posture rigid. "What about Jake Lawson?" Emily said, her voice steady but edged with accusation. Greg's face went blank, then his lips curled into a tight smile. "What about him? He was my partner," Emily continued, leaning forward. "And I have reason to believe you know more about his death than you're letting on." Greg's smile faltered, but only for a moment. The calm, controlled demeanor returned. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice smooth. Max let out a low growl from beside Emily. She reached down, giving him a reassuring touch. "Greg, I know you're lying," she said, her voice cold now. "I've got a photograph of you standing in front of a van, the same van that was seen at Jake's last location. You've been tied to a security company. And I've got a note that Jake left for me, telling me to trust no one. And that includes you." Greg's eyes narrowed, the smile slipping from his face entirely. But then, almost as if he had rehearsed it, he leaned back in his chair and laughed. "You think you know everything, don't you?" he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But you're wrong. You have no idea what's really going on here. "What's really going on?" Emily shot back, her voice tight. Greg stood up, pacing around the room. He wasn't as controlled as before. Something was unraveling. "You're right about one thing," he said, stopping and turning to face her. Jake had gotten too close. He was starting to figure things out. "But you have no idea what you've walked into." Emily narrowed her eyes. What did he mean by that? Max was on edge now, his stance alert, ready for anything. Suddenly there was a loud bang from the hallway, followed by shouting. Emily's hand went to the gun at her side, her instincts taking over. Max growled, ready to protect. The door burst open, and a man in a police uniform entered the room. It was Sergeant Maddox. Sergeant Maddox's entrance felt like the air in the room had been sucked out. Emily's heart pounded, but her eyes never left the man she'd suspected all along. He stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the light from the hallway, his face expressionless. The room grew tense, the quiet before the storm. Max let out a low growl, sensing the danger that Maddox represented. Emily's fingers tightened on the grip of her gun, but she kept it holstered for now. She needed answers, not a shootout. Maddox liquored from Greg to Emily, his lips curling into a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was as if he knew something she didn't, something she was missing. A sense of foreboding filled the room, thick and suffocating. "What's going on here, Maddox?" Emily asked, her voice calm but firm. Maddox stepped into the room, his polished shoes making a soft click against the floor. His presence filled the space, oppressive and commanding. "Just having a little chat, Emily," he said, his tone mockingly casual. "Greg and I go way back. We've had our share of business dealings, haven't we, Greg?" Greg didn't answer. He remained silent, his eyes shifting between Maddox and Emily, but his face betrayed nothing. Emily felt a wave of unease wash over her. Maddox's eyes gleamed, as if he enjoyed the tension he'd just created. He turned back to Emily, taking a slow step closer. "I'm not going to let you drag this out any longer, Maddox," Emily said, her voice low and controlled. "Jake's dead, and you know more about it than you're letting on." Maddox raised an eyebrow as if amused. He didn't seem rattled by her accusation, not in the slightest. "You've got it all figured out, don't you, Emily?" he said with a smirk. "You think I had something to do with your precious partner's death? That's cute. You've got nothing." The challenge in his voice was clear. Maddox didn't care that she was accusing him. If anything, it only seemed to amuse him more. "I know you were at the scene," Emily said, stepping forward, her voice gaining strength. "I know you've been involved with this whole thing from the beginning. You're not just some random cop, are you?" Maddox's smirk faltered for the briefest of moments, his eyes narrowing. It was enough to make Emily pause. The tiniest crack in his confident demeanor. "You're not a cop at all, are you?" she pressed. "You're part of something bigger. You've been covering something up, Maddox." Maddox's expression darkened. He took a step back, as if to collect himself. There was a flicker of rage in his eyes, and for the first time since he entered the room, Emily saw a hint of vulnerability. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by his usual mask of control. "So you think you've figured me out, Maddox?" said his voice colder now. "You've got no idea what you're dealing with, Emily. You think this is all about Jake. This is much bigger than him. Much bigger than you." Max's low growl vibrated through the room again, and Emily felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She could feel the weight of the situation settling over her. They weren't just dealing with a dirty cop. Maddox was something more. The question was what? "What are you talking about?" Emily asked, her voice steady but laced with an edge of anger. Maddox stepped forward, leaning in slightly as if to whisper a secret. "There is a war going on, Emily. One that no one talks about. A war that's been hidden in plain sight for years. And you've just walked right into the middle of it." Emily's pulse quickened. The words hung in the air like a challenge, something she couldn't ignore. Maddox wasn't just a part of this. He was a player in something far more dangerous. "What war?" Emily demanded, her hand finally reaching for the gun on her side. Maddox smirked again, taking another step back. "I'd explain it to you, Emily. But she mostly died when Jerry. But she mostly died when Jerry 6. Died. Not yet." Max's growl deepened, his body tense with anticipation. The dog could sense the growing danger, and he was ready for whatever came next. Emily felt the adrenaline surge through her veins. This wasn't just about Jake anymore. She had just uncovered the tip of something far darker. Suddenly there was another sound. A faint click followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching from outside the room. Maddox froze. His face twitched ever so slightly. Emily tensed. She wasn't alone. The game had just shifted. The next day, the fog of confusion had only deepened. Emily couldn't shake the weight of the conversation with Maddox from the night before. There was something about him, something sinister she hadn't quite been able to place. Something about his calm demeanor and the way he seemed to have all the answers she hadn't figured out yet. The war he had mentioned, the one hidden in plain sight. What was it, Max? Her partner was more than just a canine dog. He was her anchor in this storm of uncertainty. She had always relied on him to read situations that her human senses couldn't grasp. If there was something Maddox wasn't saying, Max would pick up on it. And sure enough, as Emily stood there looking over the case files at the station, Max's low growl vibrated through the room. Emily turned toward him, her gaze sharp. Max had never growled at the station before. He only growled when something was off, when danger lurked in the shadows. "What is it, boy?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with concern. Max's eyes were fixed on the door, his body tense. He was staring at something, or someone, just out of sight. Emily followed his gaze, her instincts kicking in. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew something was wrong. A moment later, the door to the station opened and a tall figure stepped inside. It was Greg, the man who had been with Maddox last night, the one who had said nothing but had clearly been involved in some way. His presence was unsettling, and Emily could feel the air in the room grow heavier. He walked toward her desk with slow, deliberate steps. Emily didn't say anything as he approached, but her fingers instinctively brushed the grip of her gun. She knew she had to be cautious. Greg stopped just short of her desk and looked down at the files. His eyes flickered over them, and then he turned his gaze to her. There was no apology in his eyes, no regret. Just a coldness that sent a chill down Emily's spine. "What do you want, Greg?" she asked, her voice icy. Greg shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Just thought I'd come by and see how you're doing. You know, after everything that happened." Everything that happened. It sounded like an empty phrase, a meaningless one. Yet the way he said it, the way his voice didn't betray any emotion, made Emily even more suspicious. "I'm fine," Emily replied, her tone sharp. "What exactly are you doing here?" Greg didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved closer to the desk and laid a small envelope in front of her. He didn't touch it, just slid it across the table like it meant nothing. "Take a look at that," he said simply. Emily hesitated, her suspicion growing. But she reached out and picked up the envelope. It was plain, with no markings, no return address. She opened it, revealing a single sheet of paper. It was a note. A warning. "The truth is hidden. You're getting too close. Let it go." Emily's pulse quickened. She read the note twice, then glanced up at Greg. He was standing there, calm, collected, watching her with those cold eyes. "What's this supposed to mean?" she demanded. Greg didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Emily with more questions than answers. She stood there, the note clenched tightly in her hand, trying to make sense of the warning. Who was threatening her, and why? She had been closing in on Maddox, but now it seemed like someone else was watching her too. The deeper she went, the more dangerous this case became. Max, sensing his partner's anxiety, let out another low growl. His ears perked, his eyes scanning the room for any threat. "What now, Max?" Emily muttered under her breath. Max's gaze shifted toward the door, his body coiled and ready to act. Emily's gut told her they weren't done with Greg yet. She wasn't done with Greg either. The afternoon sun had barely pierced the gray clouds over the city as Emily and Max walked down the cold alley behind the station. The note had shaken her. It wasn't just a warning. It was a direct challenge. Someone was watching her. Someone knew she wouldn't back down, and they were counting on that. She needed to move quietly. She couldn't trust just anyone anymore. Not with this case. Her captain had told her to take a few days off, let the investigation rest, but that wasn't possible. Not now. Not with Max still alert and restless, his nose catching invisible trails. Max suddenly stopped. His snout dipped to the cracked pavement. He sniffed once, twice, then let out a small bark. "You found something?" Emily crouched next to him. Max led her to a pile of trash bins. Tucked behind them was a box. Plain cardboard, but sealed with brown tape. It hadn't been there yesterday. Emily pulled on gloves and carefully cut the tape. Inside were files. Police files. Files she hadn't seen before. Officer reports, surveillance images, even internal emails. Every single one was marked confidential. At the very bottom was a photo. Her partner. Officer Reynolds. The man whose funeral they'd just held. The picture was grainy, taken at night, but the timestamp showed it was just 2 nights before his murder. He was standing next to Greg. Emily's breath caught. The two were shaking hands outside an abandoned warehouse on 11th and Main. That building had been condemned for years. What was Reynolds doing there? And why with Greg? Max barked again. Yeah, I see it too. Emily snapped a picture of the photo with her phone. She tucked everything back into the box, keeping the photo in her coat pocket. We need to check that warehouse, Max. By dusk they were there. The warehouse loomed like a corpse frozen in time. Windows boarded. Paint peeling. The door creaked as Emily pushed it open. Her flashlight cut through the dusty air like a blade. Max entered first, his nose twitching. They moved carefully room by room. Empty crates, broken equipment, graffiti. Then they found it. A door in the floor, a cellar hatch half hidden under a tarp. Emily tugged it open. Stairs descended into darkness. You ready? She whispered. Max didn't hesitate. The basement was colder than the air above. A long single bulb hung from the ceiling, its light flickering. And against the back wall were photos, a wall of them. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all of police officers. Some circled in red, some with X's over their eyes. Her stomach turned. There was a list pinned to the side. Officer names, codes, dates, and near the bottom, hers. Emily, Reynolds, Maddox. She stepped back. This wasn't just about her partner's murder. This was bigger. A purge. A hit list. And she was next. Max growled lowly. His body stiffened. Then she heard it. A soft click behind her. The sound of a gun being cocked. Emily didn't turn around. Not yet. Her fingers hovered near her holster, heartbeat thudding in her ears. Max stood in front of her. His stance rigid, a low growl bubbling from his throat. Whoever was behind her, they hadn't fired. Not yet. That meant they wanted something. Or they were waiting for her to make the wrong move. Say something, she said firmly, eyes fixed on the photos in front of her. A chuckle. Low, dry, unfamiliar. You should have come here, detective. Male voice. Smooth, cold. Emily slowly raised her hand, still not turning around. You knew Reynolds, she said. Silence. She continued. You knew him and you killed him. Why? A pause. Then the died in sound of a shoe scraping across the concrete floor. Reynolds made a choice. And choices have consequences. Max shifted. Emily dropped low and rolled. In the same instant Max lunged. A shot rang out. Concrete chipped near her shoulder. She was up in a crouch, gun drawn, sweeping her flashlight toward the shadows. Max had tackled the man, teeth flashing, a snarl that echoed off the walls. The man shouted, struggling, swinging his weapon wildly. Drop it, Emily barked. Another shot. Emily fired once. Twice. The gun clattered to the ground. Max held the man down, teeth bared but not biting. Emily approached, gun steady. She kicked the weapon aside and flipped the attacker onto his back. Blood. Shoulder wound. Breathing but barely conscious. She leaned in close. Who are you working for? The man coughed, grimaced, then looked at her with a flicker of hate. You don't get it. This goes way beyond Reynolds. Then tell me. He chuckled again, weaker this time. They're everywhere. Then his eyes rolled back. He passed out. Emily called it in. Paramedics. Backup. But she didn't give full details. Not yet. She didn't trust anyone. Not until she knew who was clean. Back at the station, she and Max sat in the dim quiet of the interrogation room. The files from the box were spread on the table. Photos. Notes. The hit list. Someone inside the department was feeding these people information. Someone high enough to know officer movements. Internal investigations. Schedules. Reynolds had been onto them. That's why he met with Greg. That's why he was killed. Emily stared at the list. Her name wasn't just near the bottom anymore. It was now circled in red. Max rested his head on her knee. We're getting close, boy, she whispered. Too close. The interrogation room lights flickered. Emily leaned back in the chair, arms crossed, watching the hallway through the one-way mirror. Max sat beside her, unusually still. His ears twitched every time someone walked past the door. Something was off. Even the hum of the station sounded different, like the building was holding its breath. A soft knock. Sergeant Daniels entered, clipboard in hand, eyes tired. You okay? He asked. Emily nodded, but her gaze stayed fixed on his expression. What do you need? She asked. He stepped closer. The guy you brought in. Hair's in critical condition. But there's something you need to see. Daniels laid a folder on the table. Inside, photos. Surveillance stills. One of them stopped Emily cold. It was her. Walking Max through the park 2 nights ago. Another showed her leaving her apartment. A third, standing at Reynolds' grave. "Who took these?" she asked quietly. Daniels shook his head. "We don't know. They were slipped under the front desk last night. No note, no prints." She looked up. "This is surveillance. Professional. Someone's following me." Daniels gave a heavy sigh. "You're not the only one." He pulled out another photo. Captain Morris, her superior, meeting someone in a black SUV outside the station. The license plate was blurred, but the timestamp matched the morning Reynolds was killed. Emily's jaw clenched. "If Morris is in on it..." Daniels cut her off. "We don't say that. Not yet. Not without proof." She leaned forward. "Then we get proof." Later that night, Emily and Max drove through the city streets. She avoided her apartment. Too obvious. She needed somewhere quiet, somewhere she could think. They ended up in the old Marina district. Abandoned warehouses, rusted boats, wind slicing through broken windows. Emily parked beside a decaying fishing shack. She turned to Max. "You still with me, partner?" Max licked her hand once. Inside the shack she laid out everything. The files, the hit list, the surveillance. She pinned them to the old cork wall with fishing hooks, stepped back, studied the web forming. Every string led to one place, the department. Her phone buzzed. Blocked number. She answered, heart in her throat. A voice, mechanical, masked. "If you want to know the truth about Reynolds, go to Pier 13. Midnight. Come alone." The line went dead. She looked at Max. "Alone, my ass." They arrived at Pier 13 just before midnight. Fog rolled over the water, thick and suffocating. The pier creaked under their steps. Max walked beside her, ears high, tail stiff. A figure emerged from the fog. Hooded. Hands in coat pockets. Emily raised her flashlight. "Who are you?" The figure stepped closer. "When I heard Reynolds died, I knew you'd come." The voice. Female. Young. Emily lowered the light slightly. "You knew him?" The woman nodded. "He was investigating something deep. An internal network. Cops, politicians, ex-military. They called themselves the Circle. He was close to exposing them. Then he vanished." Emily took a step closer. "Why didn't you go to IA?" "Because IA is part of it." Emily froze. The woman held out a flash drive. "Everything he found is on this. Use it wisely." Before Emily could ask more, the woman turned and disappeared into the fog. Max let out a low whine. Emily held the drive tightly. It felt heavier than it should have. Like it carried the weight of something far darker than she'd imagined. Emily didn't sleep. She stared at the flash drive as if it might explode. It sat on the table of the Marina shack next to a half-burned candle and a pile of notes Max had managed to pour into some kind of order. He was asleep now, chin resting on her boot, the steady rhythm of his breathing the only sound. Emily inserted the flash drive into her encrypted laptop. Password prompt. Not unexpected. She tried Reynolds' badge number. Access granted. She leaned back. Folders popped up. Project Echo, Circle logs, operative list. Her pulse jumped. She opened the operative list first. Dozens of names. Some she recognized. Some she wished she didn't. Captains, sergeants, judges, even a senator. And next to each name, a status column. Active, compromised, eliminated. She swallowed hard. Morris was on the list. Status, active. Daniels was not. Relief, a tiny one. She clicked into Circle logs. Audio files. Meetings, conversations, plans. Encrypted, but she could recognize Reynolds' voice in one. "If you're hearing this, I'm already dead." She froze. The message continued. "I got too close. The Circle isn't just real, it's in everything. Courts, cops, contractors. They killed 3 of our own before I got proof. I can't trust anyone, except maybe Emily. If she's listening, tell her Max is more than a K9. He remembers. He knows the scent. He saw them. Follow him." Emily pressed pause. Max stirred, lifting his head. She looked down at him. "You saw them," she whispered. His ears perked. She opened Project Echo. A map. GPS logs from patrols. Times. Locations. Overlapping routes. Highlighter paths. A building name kept showing up. Redstone Labs. An old tech research firm turned security contractor. The same place Reynolds had visited 2 days before his death. She dug deeper. Security footage. Reynolds confronting someone. A blurry face. The timestamp matched the last GPS ping, before his signal went dead. Emily stood up. "We go to Redstone." They left the marina before dawn. She called Daniels from a burner. "Meet me at the old scrapyard on 4th. 1 hour. No one else." She didn't say why. Didn't need to. Redstone Labs was out past the industrial zone. Barbed wire. Watchtowers. Cameras. Emily used a telephoto lens to scout from a rooftop across the street. Guards patrolled in pairs. Military-grade rifles. But Max kept looking northeast. Whining. She followed his gaze. A drainage canal behind the complex. Overgrown. Rusted gate. Unwatched. She marked the spot on her tablet. Back at the scrapyard, Daniels waited. He looked exhausted. She handed him the flash drive. "Reynolds left us a war map." Daniels whistled low. "What do we do?" "We break in." "You're insane." Emily pointed at Max. "He saw them. He remembers." Daniels looked at Max. Max stared back, calm and solid. "Then, I guess we follow the dog." That night, under the cloak of darkness, they moved. Through the drainage canal. Crawling. Silent, cold. Max led the way. At the back of Redstone, an old service door. Rusty. Half-bolted. Daniels worked the lock. They slipped inside. Storage tunnels. Corridors humming with power. They followed Max. Every turn was confident, certain. They reached a lower chamber. A light flicked on. A wall covered in photos. Names. Maps. Like Reynolds' board. But worse. Emily approached. One photo made her freeze. Her. Again. Red X drawn across her face. Then footsteps behind them. Daniels spun. 3 guards. Guns raised. "Hands up!" Max growled low. Emily raised hers. But she was smiling. "Smile for the camera," she said, nodding to the blinking red light in the ceiling. Daniels pressed a hidden switch on his belt. Live feed. Everything broadcast. To every major newsroom in the city. And to internal affairs. Time to burn the circle. The fallout began at dawn. The footage Emily and Daniels leaked ignited the city. News vans swarmed Redstone Labs. Protesters gathered outside precincts. Anonymous voices flooded tip lines. The circle, no longer a rumor. But truth had its price. Daniels was suspended. Emily had to go off-grid. And Max was now a target. They moved safe house to safe house. Abandoned motels. Boat garages. An old bakery in the hills. Max adjusted. Never complained. But each night, as Emily stared at the flickering news feeds, she saw the weight in his eyes. He missed Reynolds. They both did. One night a knock. 3 taps. A pause. 2 more. Daniel's code. Emily opened the door. He looked rough. Unshaven. A sling around his shoulder. "They tried to grab me outside. He muttered. "Barely got away." Max growled low but wagged his tail. Daniels reached into his coat. "Got this before they wiped my system." A printout. A partial address. Coded, but Emily had seen enough to recognize the structure. A circle node. Possibly the one coordinating internal hits. Emily traced it to a location just outside the city. An old vet center. Decommissioned after the riots. Now supposedly empty. Max whined when she mentioned it. She crouched beside him. "You've been there." His tail tucked. Eyes low. Emily exchanged a glance with Daniels. "What happened to him there?" Daniels exhaled. "You remember that story?" "The test group from the K9 unit, rumors they were used for." Emily nodded. "Mind conditioning. Behavioral rewrites." Max's body tensed. He was one of Bolas. "Them," Daniel said. Emily felt sick. All those commands Max followed without hesitation. Were they his, or were they planted? "We need to know what they did to him," she said. "We need to go back." The next morning, Emily stood at the edge of the woods outside the vet center. Daniels adjusted the drone controller. "Thermal's clean. But I don't trust it." Neither did she. The building loomed like a forgotten memory. Fences half collapsed, windows broken, but power lines still connected. Someone was inside. Max didn't want to go near it. He paced, barked once, then walked forward. Emily followed. They crept in through a side breach. The inside was darker than night. Broken exam tables. Filing cabinets overturned. And a sound. Metal scraping. Daniels moved left. Emily stayed center. Max trotted ahead. They reached a room labeled K9. Neural testing restricted. Emily's breath caught. Inside cages, desks, electrodes still hanging, and a file drawer. She pulled it open. Subject X17, Max. The folder shook in her hands. Surveillance images, brain scans, test protocols, commands Max had been trained to ignore. And one strange note. Subject retains memory beyond conditioning. Possible anomaly. Daniels read over her shoulder. They tried to erase him, but he remembered. Emily looked down at Max. He was staring at a broken mirror, seeing something only he could see. "They hurt you here," she said softly. He didn't bark, didn't move. But his eyes burned. Emily grabbed every file she could carry. They torched the rest. Outside, as the sun rose over the treetops, she held Max's face. "You're not a weapon. You're my partner." He licked her hand. Daniels checked his phone. 3 new names hit the news this morning. Ones we saw in the operative list. Emily nodded. "Then it's working." They looked back at the smoldering building. The past couldn't hurt Max anymore. But the people who built it, they were still out there. And Max was coming for them. The morning after torching the vet center, Emily received a call from a blocked number. She let it ring twice. Max sat, alert at her feet. Daniels watched the window shotgun on his lap. Emily answered. "Who is this?" A man's voice, low and breathless. "You want to end the circle? I have something. But I want out. Witness protection. Immunity." Emily stayed quiet. He continued. "Meet me tonight. Under the Waverly Bridge. Midnight." Click. Daniels raised an eyebrow. Emily nodded. "He knows something." Max growled softly. "Not a warning. An agreement." They spent the day prepping. Max's gear was cleaned, harness tightened. Emily loaded a new magazine into her sidearm. Daniels installed a tracker drone near the bridge. Midnight came fast. They waited, in a stolen van across the canal. Rain tapped the windshield. The bridge was empty. Max's ears twitched. Movement. A figure stepped out from the shadows. Hooded. Limped slightly. Emily approached slowly, weapon low. "You called." The man lifted his head. Late 40s. Scars. Eyes darting everywhere. "You're Emily Ross." She nodded. He glanced at Max. "That's him. The one who survived Redstone." Emily's silence was confirmation. The man shook his head. They were afraid of him. Said he remembered too much. They never got a clean slate on him. Daniels joined them. "Names, places, give us everything." The informant pulled out a flashcard. "Encrypted directory. Contains audio logs, movement schedules and access codes." He paused. "You need to understand. The circle's not just cops and contractors. They've got federal ties. Old intelligence routes. They kill leaks before they hit daylight." Emily took the flashcard. "Why help now?" "Because my name's on the list. Marked for elimination. And I want out." Max growled again. Daniels stiffened. "We're being watched." From the other side of the canal, 2 dark SUVs rolled up. Emily shouted, "Run!" Gunfire erupted. Max charged ahead. Emily fired cover rounds, dragging the informant back. Daniels blew out a tire on the lead SUV. The second skidded and slammed into the embankment. Max leapt into the fray, taking down one of the attackers with a brutal lunge. The rest fled into the dark. Emily pulled the informant to safety. Daniels limped in last. Breathing hard. Bleeding. But alive. They escaped. Barely. Back at the hideout, they decoded the flashcard. The logs were gold. Voicemails from Circle Hire UPS. Plans to shut down Redstone, reroute assets, frame Emily for Reynolds' death. Schedules for silent terminations, including one set for Daniels. Emily gritted her teeth. "This is what we needed." Daniels leaned back. "This is what they'll kill for." Emily turned to Max. "You ready to go hunting again?" He barked once. Sharp. Certain. "Then, we take the fight to them. No more shadows." The next morning, the safe house buzzed with a tense energy. Emily spread the decrypted files across the table, every name, address and timestamp. Daniels limped in, bandaged, but focused. Max sat upright beside the doorway, eyes locked on every movement. "We move fast," Emily said. "This information won't stay secret long." Daniels pointed at a name on the screen. "Kessler. That's the one who issued my transfer. The one trying to pin Reynolds' murder on you." Emily nodded. Then we start with him. They tracked Kessler to a secure executive compound, just outside city limits. Private roads. A guardhouse manned by ex-military. They didn't have time for subtle. Emily rigged a false security alert. Fire response on the northern perimeter. As the guards rushed to investigate, Emily, Daniels and Max slipped through the southern gap in the fence. The house was silent. Too silent. Max sniffed the air, low growl forming. Daniels whispered, "Something's wrong." They entered through the kitchen. Signs of a hasty departure. Cup of coffee still warm. Emily swept the living room. Nothing. Bedroom. Empty. Basement door slightly ajar. Max barked once. Sharp. Emily kicked it open. Kessler was there. Tied to a chair. Bruised. Eyes wide with terror. Daniels stepped forward. "Who did this?" Kessler croaked. "You're too late. They know. They're burning everything. Redstone. The safe houses. All of it." Emily leaned in. "Names. Who's leading the purge?" Kessler struggled to speak. "One name. The old man. Nobody sees him. Nobody speaks his real name. But hair's in the logs. Entry 143. Daniels checked the flashcard. Entry 143. Audio only. Distorted voice. All assets marked. Begin, phase 0. Burn, silence, erase. Emily's blood chilled. He's erasing the circle's existence. We have days. Maybe hours. Max growled loud and insistent. Someone else was coming. Emily swept the back hallway. A figure in tactical gear. She fired twice. Sent a mass. The man dropped. Mask shattered. A familiar face. One of the cops from Reynolds' funeral. Kessler gasped. "They've embedded everyone. Even your precinct." Daniels looked at Emily. "We're running out of places to hide." Emily stood. Cold fire in her voice. "Then we stop hiding." She turned to Max. "Time to draw them out." He barked once. Loud. Ready. The tension in the room was palpable. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was running out of time. The flash drive Greg had given her, the one she had held onto, now burning a hole in her pocket, might be the key to unraveling the mystery. But it was still just a fragment of the larger puzzle. Max stood beside her, his eyes sharp, scanning the room with that familiar, unwavering focus. He could sense it too. The room was closing in on them as if something was about to break wide open. Emily sat at her desk staring at the flash drive, still unsure of what it contained. The cryptic note, the threat, they all pointed to something much darker than she had imagined. But she wasn't backing down. Not now. Not when she was so close. She plugged the flash drive into her laptop and waited for the files to load. Her heartbeat quickened as the screen flashed with multiple folders and documents. The sheer volume of data was overwhelming. What had Greg gotten himself involved in? One by one, Emily began opening the files, her eyes scanning each one quickly. Most of them seemed mundane at first, contracts, case files and reports, but something was off. They were all tied together by a central name. A name Emily recognized immediately. Maddox. Her heart skipped a beat. The connection was clear now. Maddox wasn't just a corrupt cop. He was at the Kaiminport's center of it all. Every document, every note, every file seemed to point back to him. But there was one file buried deep in the folders that caught Emily's attention. It was labeled simply, "The Hidden Message." She clicked on it. The file opened, revealing a short cryptic text. It looked like a journal entry written in a hurried, almost illegible script. "The truth lies beneath the surface, in the places no one dares to look. If you're reading this, it's already too late. You've been marked. The war is already here and there's no turning back. Maddox knows everything. He's the puppet master. He pulls the strings. It's not just about Jake. It's about something bigger, something none of us can stop. But if you want answers, find the key. Look in the places they don't want you to go." Emily felt her stomach tighten. The word sent a chill down her spine. She knew deep down this wasn't just about Jake anymore. This wasn't about a single corrupt cop or a missing file. It was bigger, much bigger. And Maddox wasn't just a player. He was the one orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. He was the one who had pulled the strings from the very beginning. Max growled low and steady. Emily turned toward him and she saw the warning in his eyes. They weren't alone. She wasn't alone. Someone was watching. The room was silent except for the soft tapping of keys as Emily typed in the last of the code on her laptop. Her mind raced. The final puzzle piece was falling into place, but the weight of it all was crushing. Max sat by her side, his sharp eyes never leaving her. She could feel his concern, his unease. Something was coming, something they hadn't prepared for. She hit enter. The screen flickered before displaying a new document, its title simple yet chilling. The list. Emily stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. But the list wasn't what she had expected. It wasn't a list of suspects. It wasn't a list of people to arrest. It was a list of names, and at the very top, there was Maddox's name. But that wasn't what made Emily's blood run cold. It was the names beneath it. Each one was linked to someone she knew, someone in her department. People she had worked with, trusted, even called friends. Her breath caught in her throat. How deep did this go? How far had Maddox's influence spread? Her mind raced as she scrolled down the list. Officers. Detectives. Even some in high-ranking positions. They were all compromised. This wasn't just a rogue cop anymore. This was a full-scale operation, one that had infiltrated the very core of law enforcement. Emily's stomach churned as she looked at the next name. It was Greg's. He wasn't just an informant. He was a part of this, a pawn in a much larger game. Max growled again, his ears pinned back. His instinct was right. The danger was closing in. Suddenly the door to the office slammed open, and Emily's head shot up. Greg stood in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. He had no idea what Emily had uncovered. But he knew enough to understand that everything was about to change. Emily stood up slowly, her hand resting on the sidearm holstered at her waist. You should have come here, she thought. Not now. Not when the truth was finally in her hands. What do you want? She demanded. Greg's eyes darted around the room, his breath coming in ragged gasps. They know, he whispered. Emily's eyes were glued to Greg, his pale face betraying the fear that bubbled just beneath the surface. She could see the hesitation in his movements, the way he kept glancing around as if searching for an escape. He knows. She could feel it in the air, a quiet tension thick with unspoken words. Every second felt like a slow countdown, each one more intense than the last. Max stood rigidly beside her, his body coiled, ready for action. He had the same instincts as Emily, sensing that this moment could change everything. His low growl rumbled in the air, breaking the silence. Greg finally spoke, his voice trembling. They know, Emily. They found out everything. Emily's gaze never wavered from him. What do you mean they know? She asked, her voice a controlled calm. Her fingers brushed against her sidearm again, just in case. Greg swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. Maddox. He has eyes everywhere. You're not the only one looking for answers anymore. Max's growl deepened, his muscles tense. But Emily ignored it for the moment. She needed answers, and she needed them now. What do you know about Maddox? Emily pressed. She had already connected the dots. Maddox was at the heart of this whole mess, but she needed to know just how far his web had spread. Greg hesitated, his eyes darting to the door, the windows, anywhere but her face. I can't tell you everything. They're watching us, all of us. His words barely above a whisper. You have no idea what you're up against. Maddox is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a network of people in the force, the government. It's everywhere. Emily stepped closer to him, her voice low but demanding. If you know something, now's the time to say it. I need everything you have. Don't hold back. Greg's eyes widened. I don't want to be part of this anymore. I thought I could stop it, but I was wrong. Maddox isn't just some bad cop. He's part of something bigger, a system that's been in place for years. And now you're a target too. Emily's pulse quickened. This was no longer just a case of corruption. This was a conspiracy, a deep-rooted dark system that she had no idea how to fight. Max barked sharply, snapping Emily from her thoughts. The sound echoed in the room, a warning. Greg looked toward the door, again, his eyes filled with panic. He backed away, but Emily wasn't done yet. Where are you going, Greg? She demanded. Greg's hand trembled as he reached for the door handle. I'm sorry, Emily, but I can't help you anymore. With that, he was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway, leaving Emily standing there, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. Max padded over to her side, his steady presence grounding her. He could sense the danger, they both could, and now more than ever Emily knew the stakes had just been raised. She needed to find Maddox, She needed to expose everything, no matter the cost, and she couldn't do it alone. Emily stood in the silence of the room, her mind racing. The urgency of the situation pushed her into action, but the weight of Greg's words held her in place. What had he meant? What was it about Maddox and the network he spoke of? She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed the number she had avoided for so long, Officer Daniels. Daniels was one of the few officers she still trusted, but even that trust had its limits. He was a good cop, but he worked in a department where loyalty sometimes meant turning a blind eye. Still, he was one of the few who might have answers. The phone rang twice before Daniels picked up. Daniels, his gruff voice echoed through the speaker. "It's Emily," she said, keeping her tone firm. "I need information. Now." There was a pause on the other end, and she could almost hear him weighing his options. Finally he responded. "What kind of information? I need to know everything you can about Maddox. And I mean everything. He's part of something bigger, and I think he's involved in something that goes way beyond just dirty cops." Daniels sighed heavily. "You sure you want to go down this road, Emily? I've been telling you for months now to back off. This guy's dangerous. You're Enegex, not just up against one corrupt officer, you're Enegex up against a system. A whole network of people who've been covering their tracks for years. I'm asked high seals, imast already in it, Daniel," she snapped, her frustration clear. "And now I need your help." Another long silence followed, then Daniels spoke again, his voice lower. "I don't know if I can help you, but I can point you in the right direction. Frerry's a guy known only as the broker. He's the one who arranges things for Maddox. Deals, jobs, you name it. If you want to find out what Maddox is really up to, you need to find the broker." Emily's stomach twisted. "How do I find him?" Daniel's voice dropped even further. "That's the tricky part. He's got no real identity. But I've heard whispers. He frequents a bar, a little place on the outskirts of town called the Pit. You might find someone there who can point you to him. But be careful, Emily. The people who work with Maddox, they don't just disappear. They make sure you do." Emily's heart was pounding in her chest. "I'll be careful." She hung up the phone without another word, her mind already calculating the risks. She grabbed her coat, strapped her gun into its holster, and turned to Max. "Let's go." Max let out a low whine as if he understood the gravity of what was ahead. His presence by her side had become more than just comforting. It was a reminder that she wasn't walking into the darkness alone. As she stepped out of her apartment and into the cold night air, Emily could feel the weight of what Daniels had told her. A mysterious figure, an underground network. This was bigger than she had ever imagined. But she wasn't going to back down now. Not after everything she had uncovered. And definitely not after Greg's warning. She could feel it in her gut. Maddox's empire was about to come crashing down. But first, she had to find the broker. The air in the car was thick with tension. Emily's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as she drove through the deserted streets, her mind racing. Max sat silently beside her, his eyes scanning the darkness outside. He could feel the danger, as much as she could. The Pit. The name of the bar had sent a chill down her spine. A place that catered to people who didn't want to be found. A place where secrets were traded and deals were made in the shadows. It was the last place Emily wanted to be, but she had no choice. As she pulled into the rundown parking lot, she could see the faint glow of neon lights flickering in the distance. The Pit. The sign outside was barely visible, covered in grime and rust, as if it too had been abandoned to the shadows. Emily parked the car, her eyes darting to the entrance. The place didn't look like much, a small dingy building with cracked windows, and a door that looked like it hadn't been painted in years. But she knew better than to judge a book by its cover. Max growled low under his breath, his body tense. Emily reached for the gun tucked in her waistband, the cold metal, a reminder of the danger she was walking into. She opened the car door slowly, taking one last look around before stepping into the night air. Max followed closely, his paws light on the cracked pavement. The moment they stepped inside the Pit, the noise hit them like a wave. The smell of stale beer, cigarette smoke and sweat filled the air. The dim lights did little to illuminate the dark corners of the room, where patrons sat hunched over their drinks, whispering in low voices. It was a place where secrets were buried in the clink of glass and the shuffle of feet. Emily's eyes scanned the room, looking for any sign of the broker. But the bar was filled with people who blended into the shadows, their faces obscured by hoods, their movements deliberate and cautious. Max remained still by her side, his body rigid, sensing the unease in the air. She made her way toward the bar, trying to appear as calm as possible, though every instinct inside her screamed to leave. The bartender, a man with 50 tall, a weathered face and a scar running down his cheek, didn't even look up as she approached. He was cleaning a glass, his eyes focused on the task at hand. Emily leaned forward, her voice soft but commanding. "I'm looking for someone," she said. The bartender didn't respond at first, but then he paused, his gaze flickering to Max for a brief moment before he looked back at her. "Who are you looking for?" he asked, his tone flat. "I need to speak with the broker," Emily said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. The bartender's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened around the glass he was cleaning. "Don't know who you're talking about," he said casually, as if the name meant nothing to him. Emily didn't buy it. She had seen enough of this kind of behavior to know that the bartender was just playing his part. She wasn't going to be dismissed so easily. "I'm not leaving without an answer," she said, her voice firm. The bartender's eyes narrowed, and for a moment Emily thought he might call for help. But instead he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You're playing a dangerous game," he muttered, his eyes flicking nervously toward the back of the bar. "You want the broker, head to the back door, but be careful, there are eyes everywhere." Emily's stomach churned. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She nodded sharply, her grip on her gun tightening. "Thanks," she said, her voice cold. As she turned to leave, she could feel the weight of every eye in the room on her. The pit wasn't just a bar, it was a nest of vipers, and she had just stepped right into their den. Max was already at her side, his body poised for whatever might come next. She reached the back door, her heart pounding in her chest. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway that led to a set of stairs. Max growled again, low and warning, but Emily couldn't turn back. Now, she had to find the broker. And she was getting closer by the second. The stairs creaked under Emily's boots as she ascended, the dim light casting long, eerie shadows along the walls. Max trotted closely beside her, his senses on high alert. Every muscle in his body was tense, ready to react at a moment's notice. The hallway above was narrow, and the air felt stale, as though it had been untouched for years. At the top of the stairs, the corridor split into two directions, one leading to a thick metal door that looked far too secure for its surroundings, the other leading into a small office with a window that was too dark to see through. Max's ears pricked up. He could hear something. Faint footsteps, a door opening. Emily's pulse quickened. She didn't know who or what she would face behind that door, but one thing was certain: she was about to find out. She approached the door slowly, her hand moving to her sidearm, as she readied herself for what was to come. Max stood just behind her, his presence solid, like a shield. She knocked twice. A muffled voice from inside spoke. "Come in." Her heart skipped a beat. This was it. The broker. She pushed open the door carefully, her eyes scanning the room. It was a small, sterile space, the only light coming from a low-hanging lamp in the corner. The furniture was sparse, a worn desk, a few scattered papers, and a single chair where a man sat facing the window. His face was shadowed, his back to her. Emily stepped inside, her voice sharp. "I'm looking for the broker." The man didn't move for a long moment. Then slowly he turned in the chair, revealing his face. His eyes were cold, calculating, but there was something more to them, something that made her skin crawl. "I'm the broker," he said flatly, his voice smooth as velvet. "I assume you've come for information." Max growled, a deep rumbling that seemed to echo off the walls. The broker didn't flinch. "I'm not here for games," Emily said, her tone icy. "I need to know everything about Maddox and his network. Who is he working with, and why?" The broker tilted his head, studying her with an unsettling calmness. "You really have no idea what you're asking, do you?" He chuckled softly, as though finding amusement in her naivety. "I know enough to know that Maddox is part of something much bigger than a few dirty cops. People's lives are at stake." The broker's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Maddox isn't the key here, Emily. He's just another pawn. The game is far more intricate than you realize." Her heart raced as he leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "But you're in too deep now, and that's why you'll never walk away from this." Emily's grip on her gun tightened. "What do you mean?" The broker smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You've been digging around in places you shouldn't, asking the wrong questions. And people like you, people who dig too deep, they tend to disappear." Max's growl grew louder, his body shifting in front of Emily protectively. But Emily remained still, her voice unwavering. "What are you really saying?" The broker leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "I'm saying that you're walking a very dangerous path. You want answers, fine. But the truth doesn't come free. If you want to bring Maddox down, you'll need more than just information. You'll need allies. Real allies. And I can offer you that. For a price. Emily's mind raced. She wasn't about to make a deal with the devil, but she needed to know who was behind Maddox's network. She needed to see the bigger picture. What's the price? She asked, her voice low but determined. The broker's lips curled into a smile. I want you to deliver a message to Maddox. Tell him coming for him. Emily's eyes narrowed. And if I don't? The broker's smile faded, his eyes turning cold. Then you'll never get the answers you're looking for. And worse, I won't be the only one coming for you. Max bared his teeth, but Emily held up a hand, signaling him to stay calm. She couldn't let fear rule her. Not now. Not when she was so close. I'll deliver your message, she said, her voice steady. The broker nodded, his eyes glinting with something dark, something sinister. Good, he replied. But remember, Emily, when you play in the shadows, you become one of them. And once you're in, there's no turning back. With that, the broker turned his attention back to his desk, dismissing her without another word. Emily stood there for a moment longer, her mind spinning. The broker had given her the first piece of the puzzle, but she knew there was more, so much more. The true extent of Maddox's network, the people who were pulling the strings, it was all still a mystery. She glanced at Max, who was still alert, watching her every move. She could feel the weight of what was coming. The battle was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The air outside was colder than she expected. Emily stepped into the alley, feeling the chill bite at her skin. Max walked closely beside her, his body still tense, alert. The broker's words lingered in her mind, each one, like a weight, pulling her deeper into a world she wasn't sure she could escape. She had made the deal, agreed to deliver the message to Maddox. But the cost of this information, her safety, her sanity, was still unknown. She glanced back at the building, its dark windows staring back at her like cold, soulless eyes. The pit had felt like a trap, and now she was caught in it. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out, her heart skipping a beat, when she saw the name flashing on the screen. It was Daniel's. Emily, his voice came through the line, low and urgent. You need to listen to me. I've been getting calls. People are talking about you. About your Bararauri visit to the pit. Emily's pulse quickened. She wasn't surprised that word had gotten out. The broker had eyes everywhere. But Daniel sounded worried, almost fearful. What's going on? She asked, her voice sharp. They're coming for you, Emily. Maddox people. They know you've been digging into things. They've been watching you. And now they know you've gone to the broker. Emily's breath caught in her throat. I already knew they were onto me. But I didn't think they would act so fast. They've been planning this for a while, Daniels continued. They've got a network in place and they won't stop until they find you. And when they do, his voice trailed off. I'll be careful, Emily said, cutting him off. I'm not going to let them intimidate me. You don't understand, Daniels replied, his tone pleading. This isn't just about you anymore. Maddox is deeper into this than anyone realizes. He's not just a cop on the take. He's got connections everywhere in the department, in the city, and even higher than that. And now he's got you in his sights. Emily clenched her jaw. I'll deal with Maddox. I'm going after him. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when Daniel spoke again, his voice was heavy with regret. Don't say I didn't warn you. You're walking into something far bigger than you think. Be careful, Emily. Trust no one. The line went dead before she could respond. She stood still for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle in. She had known the stakes were high, but hearing Daniel's fear, hearing the uncertainty in his voice made it feel even more real. Max whined softly, his eyes locked on hers as though sensing her unease. Emily shook her head, her resolve hardening. She wasn't going to back down. Not now. She turned on her heel, heading toward her car. She had a job to do. A dangerous one. But it was her only chance to bring Maddox down and find out the truth. She couldn't let fear rule her. Not after everything she had been through. The message had to be delivered. The broker's words rang in her ears. Tell Maddox I'm coming for him. As she climbed into her car, Emily glanced at Max. Let's go, boy, she said softly, her voice filled with determination. We're not backing down. Max gave a low bark, his tail wagging slightly. Emily started the engine. The sound of the car's roar, a comforting presence in the silence of the night. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and deception. But Emily knew that she was one step closer to the truth, one step closer to ending Maddox's reign, and one step closer to avenging Greg. The night was unusually still. Emily drove through the dimly lit streets, the sound of her tires on the wet road, the only noise in the quiet of the city. Max sat beside her, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. His ears perked up every time a sound reached him, but otherwise he was calm, as if he knew what was coming. Emily's mind raced. She had just delivered the message to Maddox, the man who had been at the center of the web of corruption. The man who had ruined so many lives, including the life of her partner Greg. She could feel it in her gut. Tonight would be the night that everything changed. Max shifted in the seat beside her, and Emily's grip tightened on the steering wheel. She knew the danger. She had been warned by Daniels, by everyone around her. Maddox wasn't just a crooked cop. He was the mastermind behind a much larger criminal network. The warehouse. The meeting place. She had to confront him. But as much as her mind was set, her body felt the pull of fear. She pushed the fear aside, focusing on the task ahead. Max would be by her side, just like he had been through everything. His loyalty was unwavering, his courage unmatched. And together they were going to bring this nightmare to an end. The calm before the storm. It was always the quietest, just before everything hit. She had to be ready. As she turned the corner toward the old warehouse, the dark silhouette of the building loomed in the distance. It was the perfect place for Maddox to hide. An abandoned structure forgotten by most, but not by him. She parked a block away from the warehouse, stepping out of the car with Max at her side. She could feel the weight of what she was about to do pressing on her chest, but she pushed it aside. She had a job to finish. There was no turning back. Max growled low, his body tense. Emily didn't need to look at him to know that he sensed something. Someone was waiting for them. The air was thick with tension as Emily and Max approached the warehouse. Every step they took seemed amplified, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the night. The streets were empty, the kind of silence that felt too loud. Every flicker of a nearby streetlight cast long, eerie shadows, and every distant noise made her senses go on high alert. She reached the back of the warehouse, the rusted metal door barely hanging on its hinges. Emily glanced around one more time, making sure no one was following them, then gently pushed the door open. The creak of the hinges sent a shiver down her spine. Inside, the warehouse was shrouded in darkness save for a single dim light hanging from the ceiling. The floor was covered in dust, evidence of years of neglect. But it wasn't the emptiness of the room that unnerved her. It was the feeling of being watched. Max whined low, his muscles taut with readiness. He stepped cautiously, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. "Stay close," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness. Max's response was a soft growl, his eyes fixed on the shadows ahead. Emily felt her heart pound in her chest. They were close. Maddox was here. She could feel it. The smell of rust and mildew filled the air, but Emily barely noticed it. Her focus was entirely on the task ahead, her hand resting near the gun holstered at her waist. Suddenly the silence was broken by the sound of footsteps. Someone was coming toward them. Emily's breath caught in her throat as the figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Maddox. He stood tall and imposing, his hands casually resting at his sides, his expression cold and unreadable. "You should have stayed out of this, Emily," he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. Emily's grip on her gun tightened, but she didn't draw it yet. Not until she was sure. "I'm not afraid of you, Maddox," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here to end this." Maddox chuckled darkly, his gaze moving between her and Max. "You really think you can stop me? You're just a woman with a dog. And you're out of your depth." Max growled, his body tensed and ready to strike at a moment's notice. Emily kept her eyes locked on Maddox, refusing to show any sign of weakness. "I've been fighting corruption for years," she said, her voice unwavering. "You're just the last piece of the puzzle." Maddox's smile faltered for a second before he recovered. "You think you've won. You think you're in control. You don't know the half of it. You don't know what you're up against." Emily took a step forward, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm not here to fight you, Maddox. I'm here to stop you." For a moment Maddox said nothing. Then with a swift motion he raised his hand, signaling for someone. From the darkness 2 more figures emerged, both armed, their weapons drawn and aimed directly at Emily. "Looks like you're not the only one here," Maddox said with a smirk. "You're surrounded." Emily's heart raced, but her resolve didn't waver. This wasn't over yet. The 2 armed men moved slowly, their eyes locked on Emily and Max. The situation was escalating fast, and the odds were stacking against them. Emily's mind raced, calculating her options. She wasn't about to let Maddox win. Not now. Not after everything. Max growled again, low and menacing, as he moved into a protective stance beside Emily. The air in the warehouse felt thick with danger, every second stretching into what felt like an eternity. Emily's grip tightened on her gun, the cold metal now an anchor in her hand. "Don't do it," she warned, her voice calm but firm. "You don't have to do this." Maddox didn't even flinch. He stood there almost detached, as if this was just another part of his game. "You're out of your league, Emily," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You should have stayed out of my business. Now look where you are." Emily's breath came in shallow bursts. She was on the edge, teetering between fear and determination. But one thing was clear. She wasn't backing down. "I'm not afraid of you, Maddox," she said, her eyes never leaving his. Suddenly the sound of a distant siren pierced the silence. Emily's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't close, but the sound made her feel a flicker of hope. Help was coming. But Maddox wasn't fazed. He raised a hand, signaling his men to advance. Without warning, one of them lunged toward Emily, his gun raised, but Max was faster. The dog lunged at the man's legs, knocking him off balance. The man stumbled back, his gun firing wildly into the air as he fell. Emily didn't hesitate. She fired a shot, the sound of the gunshot ringing out as the second man fell to the ground, his weapon clattering away. Maddox's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Emily saw it, the brief moment of surprise, and she knew this fight was far from over, but this was her moment. Max was on the first man. Now his jaws locked around the man's arm, forcing him to the floor. The man yelped in pain but tried to fight back, his hand fumbling for his gun. But Max was relentless. Emily stepped forward, her gun aimed directly at Maddox. Her finger rested on the trigger, her heart hammering in her chest. Maddox, despite the blanc-frat chaos around him, stood motionless. He didn't seem worried. In fact, he seemed almost amused. "You think you've won, don't you?" he said, his voice calm as ever. "But you're too late. There's no escaping what's coming." "Shut up, Emily," snapped, her voice cracking with frustration. "It's over, Maddox. You've lost." Her words hung in the air, but before Maddox could respond, the sound of approaching sirens grew louder. Help was closer now, but the fight wasn't over yet. Maddox took a step back, his eyes scanning the room. Emily could see the calculation in his gaze, the way he was plotting his next move. He wasn't just some criminal mastermind. He was a man who always had a plan. But Emily had something he didn't: Max, and her unshakable resolve. Max finally let go of the man's arm, stepping back as he watched his handler. The man on the floor groaned, clutching his wounded arm, but Emily didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on Maddox. "You think you can run now?" Emily asked, her voice steady. Maddox didn't answer immediately. He just stood there, watching her with cold, calculating eyes. Then, with a sudden motion, he turned and bolted toward the exit, disappearing into the shadows. Without a moment's hesitation, Emily ran after him. Her gun raised, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Max!" she called out, and the dog was at her heels, moving with lightning speed. Max sprinted ahead, his paws hitting the ground with the rhythm of a drum beat. Emily was right behind him, the sound of her footsteps drowned by the pounding of her heart in her chest. The warehouse was behind them now, and they were out in the cold night air, chasing down the man who had caused so much pain, so much destruction. Maddox had a head start, but Emily knew one thing: he wasn't going to get away, not this time. Max would find him and she would bring him down. It was only a matter of time. They rounded a corner, the faint sound of Maddox's footsteps echoing ahead. He wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. He was running for his life. But Maddox wasn't just any criminal. He was dangerous. He knew how to escape, how to vanish when it seemed impossible. They were close now. She could hear him breathing heavily, his pace slowing as he realized they were gaining on him. Emily's breath came in sharp bursts as she pushed herself harder, trying to keep up with Max. She looked down at him, his fur matted with sweat and dust, but his eyes never wavered. He was focused, determined to bring this to an end, just like she was. Max darted to the left without a command, and Emily followed instinctively. They were closing in. Ahead of them, Maddox glanced over his shoulder, his eyes wide with fear. He was nearing an alley, a dead end. But he was resourceful. He could turn around, outmaneuver them. He had done it before. But this time Max was too close, and Emily wouldn't let him slip away. Maddox turned into the alley, his figure disappearing into the shadows. Emily and Max followed the narrow path, forcing them to slow down. The walls on either side were high, and the alley was filled with trash and debris. Suddenly, the sound of metal scraping against metal echoed in the alley. Maddox was moving faster now, and Emily's heart raced as she realized what he was doing. Max's ears perked up, and with one swift movement he surged forward, breaking into a full sprint, his nose to the ground. "Max!" Emily called, panic rising in her chest. She pushed herself harder, but the alley seemed to stretch on forever. Then, out of nowhere, Maddox appeared again, but this time, he wasn't alone. Two men emerged from the shadows, armed, ready to fight. Emily skidded to a halt, gun raised, her eyes darting between Maddox and the new threat. Max was already in motion, his body coiled and ready to strike. "You're not going anywhere, Maddox," Emily shouted, her voice filled with defiance. Maddox grinned, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "You thinking I'm the only one who has allies? You're outnumbered, Emily." Before she could react, one of the men lunged at her, his gun aimed at her chest. She fired first, hitting him in the shoulder. He dropped to the ground with a grunt, but Emily couldn't afford to stop. There was still one more, and Maddox was still standing. Max charged at the second man, knocking him off his feet with a powerful leap. The man screamed, but Max wasn't giving him any chance to recover. His teeth sank into the man's arm, forcing him to drop his weapon. Maddox was backing away, eyes scanning for another escape. But Emily wasn't letting him go this time. She closed the distance between them in seconds, her gun trained on him. "You're finished, Maddox," she said, her voice steady, despite the chaos around them. Max stood by her side, his teeth bared, his stance ready. Maddox's smirk faded, as he realized he had no way out. In a final act of desperation, Maddox raised his hand, pulling something from his jacket. Emily didn't hesitate. She fired. The bullet hit its mark, and Maddox fell to the ground, the object he'd been holding slipping from his hand. Emily approached cautiously, her gun still raised just in case. She was breathing hard, but the adrenaline was already starting to wear off. She could finally breathe. Max walked over to Maddox's fallen form, his growl low as if still on guard. Emily reached down, grabbing the item from the ground. A small detonator. Her heart stopped. This wasn't over. Not yet. Emily stared at the detonator in her hand, the realization hitting her like a punch to the gut. She looked at Maddox, his body sprawled on the ground, blood seeping through his clothes. He was unconscious, but his sinister plan was becoming clearer by the second. Her mind raced as she tried to process the situation. Maddox had been planning something big. The detonator in her hand was proof enough. But what exactly was he after? Was it a bomb? A trap? Or was he just trying to buy time for something? Even worse, Max stood beside her, his body tense, still watching the fallen criminals around them. Emily glanced at the two men who were still unconscious, their fates sealed by the confrontation. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, and the only sound was the faint hum of the sirens that were getting closer. She turned her attention back to Maddox, taking a deep breath as she approached him carefully. Max followed closely behind, his sharp eyes never leaving the man. Maddox groaned as he stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He blinked several times, trying to focus on Emily, who stood over him holding the detonator. His lips twisted into a cruel smile, even though he was clearly in pain. "You think this is over?" he whispered, his voice raspy. Emily felt her pulse quicken. She knelt down, her eyes never leaving his. "It's over, Maddox," she said, her voice low but certain. "You won't get away with this." Maddox chuckled weakly, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. "You don't understand, Emily. You've been chasing shadows all this time. You've been playing right into my hands." Emily's blood ran cold. She wasn't about to let him manipulate her, not anymore. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear creeping up inside her. "You think I'm just some small-time criminal?" Maddox's laugh was bitter. "No. I've been part of something much bigger, something that will change everything." The words hung in the air, their weight sinking into Emily's chest. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together the puzzle, but nothing made sense. Max growled low beside her, sensing her unease. Emily reached out gently, patting the dog's head for reassurance, but her eyes never left Maddox. He gave her a knowing look, his expression a mix of amusement and bitterness. "It's too late," he said quietly. "You'll never be able to stop what's coming." Before Emily could respond, she heard the sound of police sirens growing louder. Maddox's smirk faded into a grimace of frustration as he realized his time was up. "I can't stop it," he muttered almost to himself. "But you won't either." Suddenly the warehouse door burst open, and several officers swarmed in, guns drawn. Emily quickly stepped back, allowing them to secure the area. "Is everyone all right?" one of the officers asked, scanning the scene. "I'm fine," Emily answered, though her mind was still racing. She didn't know what Maddox had meant, but she knew one thing for sure: this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Max stood by her side, his body relaxed but alert. He knew it too. Whatever Maddox had planned, they hadn't stopped it. Not yet. Take him into custody, Emily ordered, her voice firm. But don't let your guard down. He's only one part of something bigger. As the officers cuffed Maddox and began to take him away, Emily's thoughts raced. She had stopped one dangerous man, but Maddox had been right about one thing. There was more to this than just him. She had no idea what he was involved in, but she was determined to find out. Max nudged her hand as if sensing her growing anxiety. Emily smiled down at him, grateful for his loyalty, and her resolve hardened. They weren't done yet. The truth was out there, and she was going to find it. As the sun began to rise, casting its first light over the crime scene, Emily stood still, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The air was heavy, with the scent of damp earth mixed with the lingering smell of gunpowder from the night's confrontation. The sirens had faded into the distance, the chaos of the moment subsiding into a quiet stillness. Beside her, Max stood, watch, his fur matted with the grime of the night's events, but his eyes sharp, ever alert. They had survived the night. They had taken down Maddox, the mastermind who had wreaked havoc for far too long. But as the events of the past hours replayed in her mind, Emily couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were only scratching the surface. Maddox had been captured, yes. His plans had been thwarted, his associates taken into custody. Yet his cryptic words lingered like a shadow in the back of Emily's mind. You'll never be able to stop what's coming. What did he mean? Was there more to this than she could see? And what had Maddox been a part of, hidden beneath his criminal facade? Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The case wasn't closed. Not really. As much as she wanted to believe they had won, her gut told her otherwise. The detonator she had found, the larger conspiracy, hinted at the unknown forces still lurking in the dark. All pointed to a future far more dangerous than anything they had faced. But she wasn't afraid, not with Max at her side. As she turned to leave the crime scene, her steps were slow but purposeful. The city was waking up, and with each step Emily knew that there was no going back to the way things were. The truth would come to light, piece by piece, and she was determined to find it. Max followed her, as always, his loyalty unwavering. They were a team. She couldn't have asked for a better partner. And together they would face whatever came next. The shadow that loomed over their lives wasn't over, but Emily had no intention of running from it. She would meet it head-on, armed with nothing but her determination and Max's trust. For now the city was safe, but there were more secrets waiting to be uncovered, and Emily would stop at nothing to find them. Her pursuit of the truth was far from over. And as the first rays of light pierced through the dark sky, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. The end of one chapter had only set the stage for the next, a new, even greater challenge. Max gave a soft bark, nudging her gently, as if to remind her that they weren't alone in this. Emily smiled, reaching down to ruffle his fur. They were ready. They were a team. The final battle may not have been fought yet, but one thing was certain. Emily and Max would face it together. And no matter what came next, they would never stop fighting for justice. They had come too far to turn back now. If this story touched your heart, if Max's loyalty and courage moved you, and if Emily's fight for justice kept you on the edge of your seat, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep telling powerful stories of love, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their dogs. And remember, every week, we bring you a new story that will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. So hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and join our family of storytellers. Because here every story has a heart, and every heart has a voice. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.